You just sold your customers for $500. And you don't even know it yet, you hit factory reset. You sold your old enterprise server to a random liquidator for 500 bucks. You actually think you're a financial genius for recovering that capital. In reality, you just gift-wrapped your customers' credit card data, tossed it directly into a mechanical black hole, and handed the remote control to a cyber syndicate. Excellent ROI, truly top-tier executive decision-making. Today, we are going deep into the terrifying, unregulated underworld of IT Asset Disposition, ITAD. I'm going to show you why big tech intentionally incinerates billions of dollars of perfectly good hardware without blinking. I will show you why your expensive military-grade wiping software is a pathetic joke, and how a single surviving grain of silicon will trigger a legal avalanche that buries your entire company. Strap in, let's start with the grandest illusion of them all. The cloud. You love the cloud, don't you? It sounds so soft, so weightless, so immune to the physical consequences of the real world. The cloud is not a magical realm of floating data. It is a freezing cold warehouse packed with heavy, spinning metal, and when that metal gets old, companies like Oz and Google face a brutal logistical nightmare. They don't recycle it to save the polar bears. They don't refurbish it for charity. They throw it into an industrial meat grinder. They will happily toss a perfectly functional $10,000 machine into a mechanical shredder. Why? Because they understand the abyss of liability. They know that a single leaked byte from an old drive costs more than the GDP of a small nation. They protect their stock price through absolute physical destruction. But you're different. You run a mid-sized enterprise. And your CFO decided that spending a few $1,000s on certified physical hardware destruction was ruining his quarterly spreadsheet. So he got incredibly creative. Enter the Morgan Stanley catastrophe. Wall Street's brightest minds decided to save a few pennies by hiring an unvetted moving company with zero ITAD experience to decommission thousands of their hard drives. Two guys and a truck. They handed over the financial secrets of their wealthiest clients to a discount moving service. No armored guards, no chain of custody, no cryptographic verification. Just a handshake and a prayer. Now here's where it gets interesting. According to the NIST Special Publication 800-88 Guidelines, the federal standard for media sanitization, there are exactly 3 acceptable methods for ensuring data is unrecoverable. Clear, purge, and destroy. Morgan Stanley chose none of them. They chose a moving company. Want to know exactly how much that brilliant cost-cutting decision blew up their balance sheet? The answer is going to make you physically sick. But before I show you the true price of arrogance, we need to pay the bills. Don't go anywhere. You really can't afford to. $35 million. That was the fine handed down by the SEC. Morgan Stanley tried to save a rounding error in their logistics budget, and they bought themselves a $35 million legal avalanche. That fine could have bought them an actual private island to bury those drives on. Instead, they funded their own public humiliation. This is not an expense line on a balance sheet. This is a mechanical beast eating your company's future. You look at a decommissioned server and you see a depreciated asset. You see 500 bucks you can claw back on the secondary market. You are completely blinded by the illusion of recovery. You just don't see the bomb. An improperly wiped server is not hardware. It is a ticking time bomb waiting for a plug. And here is where the entire corporate world is walking blindly into a trap they paid to set up. You paid thousands for enterprise-grade software to wipe your solid-state drives. You ran the program. You watched the little green progress bar hit 100%. You patted your IT department on the back. But your SSD is lying to you right now. It has a secret basement, up to 25% of its physical memory chips, hidden completely from your operating system. This is called over-provisioning. The drive walls off these sectors to extend its lifespan. Smart engineering. Here's the nightmare. Your wiping software can't see them either. So while you're staring at that green 100% complete ball, your most toxic financial data is sitting perfectly intact in a room your janitor doesn't know exists. A teenager with a $50 forensic tool bypasses the operating system, accesses the raw NAND chips, and downloads your unencrypted private keys. That green checkmark didn't protect you. It just gave you a false sense of security while you handed the keys to your entire corporate kingdom to a complete stranger on eBay. And then there's the most pathetic attempt at data destruction. Degaussing. Some IT managers think they are geniuses for waving a giant industrial electromagnet over old hardware. Sure, that works perfectly on ancient spinning magnetic disks from 2 decades ago. But on a modern solid-state drive, Flash memory doesn't care about your magnetic fields. The silicon chips are entirely immune. You just spent 3 days waving a heavy rock over a piece of plastic, achieving absolutely zero data destruction. And you actually paid an employee an hourly wage to execute this masterpiece of financial incompetence. You think ignoring ghost sectors is bad? Wait until you hear about the phantom menace that survives even the most brutal software wipes. It's not even on the hard drive. Let me introduce you to the firmware phantom. Advanced cryptojacking malware doesn't sit in the operating system waiting to be politely deleted. It burrows deep into the core architecture of the server. It embeds itself directly in the BIOS firmware. You can format the drives, reinstall the OS, scrub every inch of visible storage. The digital parasite simply does not care. It goes dormant, perfectly camouflaged, waiting patiently for the hardware to be resold to its next unsuspecting victim. You sell your clean, supposedly wiped server to a Fortune 500 company. They plug it into their pristine, highly secure network. The moment power hits the motherboard, the dormant firmware parasite wakes up. It silently infects their entire infrastructure. Now your old hardware is quietly mining cryptocurrency for a cyber syndicate, siphoning processing power from a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. When their elite cybersecurity team traces the infection back to the source, they find the serial numbers. They find your company's name on the hardware registry. Say hello to massive corporate litigation. You didn't just sell a piece of used metal. You acted as a Trojan horse, delivering an engine of mass digital destruction directly into the heart of an innocent business partner. And your reward for this catastrophic supply chain attack? You recouped a few $100s. You traded your company's reputation and legal immunity for the price of a mid-tier iPad. You see, the fundamental flaw is pure arrogance. You believe that because you understand how to use software. You understand how data physically manifests in the real world. You think a factory reset is an ironclad guarantee. In reality, a factory reset is just a polite suggestion to a hacker. It holds up about as well as a paper umbrella in a Category 5 hurricane. The digital world is entirely dependent on the physical world. Your data is not ethereal, it is etched into solid silicon. It is trapped inside microscopic transistors, and software cannot destroy physical reality. Let's look at the drill bit fallacy. To save money on industrial shredding, you decide to handle destruction in-house. You make your interns take a power drill and bore holes through 500 hard drives. You think you are being resourceful. You drill a hole right through the center and toss it in the dumpster. Congratulations, you just created a very expensive jigsaw puzzle for criminals. Physically drilling holes through a hard drive platter only destroys data exactly where the hole was drilled. Up to 98% of the data on the rest of the platter remains perfectly readable. Forensic data brokers buy your drilled drives. They take them into a clean room, bypass the physical holes, and easily extract your executive email archives. You didn't destroy the data, you just annoyed the hacker. Finally, you realize software is a joke. You decide to do it right. You hire a destruction facility. You pack thousands of solid-state drives into cardboard boxes and load them onto a transport truck. You feel responsible, you feel secure, but you just moved the risk from a locked, climate-controlled data center to the most chaotic, vulnerable environment on the planet. The open highway, the highest risk of a catastrophic data breach, doesn't happen behind firewalls. It happens when a transport truck hits a pothole on the interstate and a box of drives shifts in the cargo hold. It happens when a minimum wage driver decides that a 4 terabyte NVMe drive looks fantastic in his pocket. Your servers survived global cyberattacks, only to be stolen during a lunch break at a cheap gas station. A package goes missing in transit. It happens every single day. But this specific package contains 2 million unencrypted social security numbers. You are now legally required to notify the federal government that your mail got lost. Your company's stock drops 12% in an hour because a delivery driver misread a barcode. You outsourced your chain of custody to a postal worker, and it detonated your entire market valuation. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, my company isn't that stupid, we have a process. We have a vendor, we have a certificate. Let me tell you a statistic that should keep you awake tonight. 40% of used drives sold on the secondary market still contain highly sensitive, recoverable, personally identifiable information. That statistic includes companies exactly like yours. Companies with processes, with vendors, with beautiful, meaningless certificates framed on the wall. That PDF certificate with the fancy gold seal from Bob's Discount Server Recycling. It is legally as useful as a wet napkin. Bob is currently buying a luxury yacht with your intellectual property. The legal system doesn't care about your budget constraints. The SEC doesn't care about your cost-saving initiatives. They only care about the implosion. We have spent the last several minutes examining the anatomy of corporate cost-cutting failure. We've watched compliance officers pretend that a PDF could magically stop a criminal syndicate. But right here, right now, the jokes are over. The mechanical shredders have powered down. The frantic alarms have stopped ringing. It is just you, me, and the cold, unforgiving reality of the digital world you have helped build. And I need you to listen to me very carefully. Everything you have done up to this point, the software wipe, the factory resets, the cheap secondary market liquidations, it was all driven by one fundamental, fatal flaw in your psychology. You actually believe that you own your corporate data. You look at a server rack and you see a shiny corporate asset. You see intellectual property, you see competitive advantage. You are completely blind to the toxic reality. You do not own that data. You are merely a temporary custodian of highly radioactive material. Data is not an asset on a balance sheet. It is a biological hazard. It is a living, breathing liability that is constantly, actively trying to leak out. And the hardware, the beautiful $10,000 solid-state drives that power your enterprise, they are not your property either. They are the containment vessels holding back a catastrophic explosion. They are a hostage situation, and you are the one tied up. The moment that hardware reaches the end of its life cycle, its value drops to absolute zero. Actually, it becomes aggressively negative. It becomes a financial black hole. But your ego refuses to accept this basic law of economic gravity. Your ego looks at decommissioned hardware and screams that there must be some residual value. Your ego tells you that throwing it away is a waste. Your ego convinces you to put a price tag on a live grenade. You are willing to risk a $50 million class action lawsuit just to claw back $500 on eBay. This is not a business strategy. It is a profound psychological sickness. It is the peak of executive arrogance. Now, let's assume the drives actually make it to the destruction facility. You watch them toss the hard drives into a massive industrial shredding machine. You hear the metal crunching. The machine spits out chunks of twisted metal and shattered plastic. To the human eye, it is absolute garbage. But to a forensic data recovery expert, it is just an unassembled goldmine. Let me introduce you to the 2mm law. To guarantee that data on a solid-state drive is unrecoverable, to truly satisfy the NIST 800-88 standard for destruction, the physical silicon chips must be aggressively pulverized into fine dust. Particles no larger than 2 millimeters. If your budget recycling vendor uses an older, cheaper shredder, it might leave chunks of silicon the size of a grain of rice. And if it leaves a chunk the size of a grain of rice, you are completely exposed. A bored teenager on a Reddit forum is going to reconstruct your company's payroll history by next Tuesday. You didn't destroy the data. All you did was create a highly concentrated, incredibly expensive storm of toxic glitter, and you paid a vendor to sprinkle it all over the secondary market. And here's the dirtiest secret in the ITAD industry. They promise to cleanly recycle your e-waste. They wave green flags and smile at your compliance officer. They issue you a beautiful, framed certificate of destruction. But behind closed doors, shredding machines consume massive amounts of electricity. Industrial shredder blades wear out and cost thousands to replace. So to maximize their profit margins, they quietly pack your intact corporate servers into rusty shipping containers and illegally export them to unregulated e-waste dumps halfway across the globe. Your proprietary source code and client databases end up sitting in a massive, smoldering landfill. Local scavengers crack open server chassis with hammers to strip out the copper and gold. The hard drives themselves are tossed aside, fully intact, waiting for organized crime syndicates to scoop them up for pennies. A journalist does an exposé on digital dumping grounds. They walk through a toxic, burning wasteland and find a perfectly readable server chassis with your pristine corporate logo on the front bezel. They broadcast that image to millions. Your brand equity evaporates in a single afternoon. That is the true cost of chasing cheap recycling contracts. Digital privacy does not exist in the software layer. You cannot code your way out of physical reality. You cannot write a script that forces a silicon chip to forget the financial secrets it has been holding for 5 years. The only true privacy that exists in the modern world is born through absolute, uncompromising mechanical destruction. Everything else is a temporary illusion of safety, a fragile glass shield waiting to be shattered. You think big tech is stupid for grinding billions into dust. They are not stupid, they are terrified. They have stared into the abyss of legal liability. And they know the abyss always wins. They understand that the only way to sever the chain of custody is to physically sever the silicon. They don't trust software, they don't trust logistics. They only trust the brutal, unyielding teeth of an industrial shredder. So the final question isn't whether your IT department followed the compliance checklist. It isn't whether you used military-grade wiping algorithms or hired a vendor with a shiny green logo. All of that is theater. The real question is whether you, as a leader, have the stomach to look at a perfectly functional, $10,000 piece of modern engineering and ruthlessly feed it into a mechanical jaw. Do you have the courage to destroy it? If you look at that server and still feel a pang of regret, if you still calculate its resale value in your head, then you have already failed. You are still clinging to the scrap value of that silicon. And because you cannot let it go, you are actively handing the keys to your entire corporate kingdom over to the lowest bidder. You are trusting your financial survival to a minimum wage driver and a teenager with a flash drive. Erase your ego, erase your desperate need to optimize every last penny. If you do not mechanically execute your hardware, the secondary market is going to financially execute your company. There is no middle ground, there is no compromise. Total physical destruction is the only way out. Embrace the shredder or prepare for the lawsuit. It really is that simple. You either pay the disposal fee today, or you pay the federal fines tomorrow. The choice is yours. Now you're probably sitting there, pulse elevated, wondering if your company is already exposed. If your drives are already on a shipping container somewhere, heading toward a smoldering landfill. But here's the truly terrifying part. Even if you survive the hardware apocalypse, there is another silent killer already inside your walls. It's not a drive, it's a contract you signed. It's a subscription you approved, and it is engineered to bleed you dry legally. Your SaaS stack is quietly siphoning millions out of your operating budget while you sleep. And unlike a hard drive, you can't shred a contract. You have to understand how it's built to trap you. Click the video on your screen right now to see the trap you're probably walking into tomorrow morning. I'll be right here waiting in the dark, analyzing your inevitable bankruptcy. See you there.